It's like a universal modern experience. You buy a brand new smartphone, and for the first 6 months, it feels like an absolute miracle of science. I mean, you can go 2 days without charging it.
Oh, yeah. And then fast forward 2 years, and you're like desperately hunting for a wall outlet by 2 in the afternoon.
Right, exactly. We have all been deeply conditioned to accept that rechargeable batteries are fundamentally disposable. They have this strict, very short expiration date. And if you're staring at your driveway right now, thinking about making the jump to an electric vehicle, that anxiety is probably front and center.
Oh, absolutely.
Is an EV just a giant smartphone that's going to become a useless brick in 5 years? So, today, welcome to our deep dive. We know your time is incredibly valuable, so we are going to make this highly efficient, skipping the fluff.
We are unpacking a mountain of sources today.
Yeah, we're cracking open billion-mile telematics data, intense climate-controlled lab tests, and shifting automotive chemistry to basically separate the facts from the anxiety about this disposable battery myth.
It really is the ultimate question for anyone looking at the EV market right now. I mean, the fear of a $20,000 mechanic bill looming right after the warranty expires is a massive psychological barrier.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. But the reality of what is happening inside these modern battery packs is a lot more complex and, frankly, a lot more resilient than the smartphone comparison suggests.
Okay. So let's start right there with the sheer volume of data we have on this. We aren't just looking at, manufacturer promises today.
No, not at all.
We are looking at real-world telematics from a firm called Recurrent, and they've analyzed over 1 billion miles of actual EV driving data. So what does 1 billion miles actually tell us about the lifespan of these cars?
Well, it tells us that the smartphone myth is completely backward. When Recurrent analyzed thousands of modern EVs, the numbers were staggering. On average, a modern EV retains 97% of its original range after 3 years on the road.
Wow. Just 3% loss.
Yeah, and after 5 years, it still retains 95%. Now,
Okay, let's translate that into daily life because percentages can get a little abstract.
sure.
If you buy a car that gets 500 kilometers of range brand new, you're telling me that after half a decade of commuting, road trips, and sitting out in the sun, you were still getting about 460 kilometers.
Precisely. The degradation curve is incredibly slow, and it flattens out over time. But there's a massive caveat here, and it's one of the reasons the battery myth persists.
Right, the older models.
Yeah, we have to separate early EV technology from what is rolling off the assembly line today. The data shows that 2023 models are keeping about 91% of their capacity after 150,000 miles. But if you look back at older 2012 models, they only retained about 81% after that same distance.
I feel like that's the ghost haunting the EV market. Everyone has a story about an early Nissan Leaf that basically became a golf cart after 4 years. Why was the drop-off so severe back then compared to now?
It comes down to thermal management. Those early mass-market models, like the first-generation Leaf, they were passively air-cooled.
Passive, like just relying on the wind.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
They relied on ambient air passing over the battery to keep it cool. And when you rapid charge a lithium-ion battery or drive it hard in the middle of an Arizona summer, it generates an immense amount of internal heat.
Right, I mean, I felt my phone get hot just from playing a game.
Exactly. And without active liquid cooling to pull that heat away, the chemical structure of the car battery degrades rapidly. Today, automakers use sophisticated liquid thermal management systems.
So they're actively pumping coolant around it?
Yes, they wrap the battery cells in cooling channels that keep them at their absolute optimal temperature, whether it is freezing outside or sweltering.
So because of that liquid cooling, catastrophic failures are just mathematically less common now.
Completely. For vehicles built from 2022 onward, the total battery replacement rate sits at a microscopic 0.3%.
Wait, 0.3%? That's practically nothing.
Compare that to those early air-cooled models, which had replacement rates hovering around 8.5%. The technology evolved.
Which perfectly sets up the incredibly blunt essay we reviewed from an Italian automotive perspective. This author made a vivid argument stating that continuing to buy an internal combustion engine, a gas car, in 2026 is effectively like buying a typewriter instead of a computer.
It's a provocative stance, but it's grounded in the unforgiving physics of energy efficiency. The essay points out something we rarely think about when we fill up at the pump.
What's that?
Internal combustion engines are shockingly inefficient. They waste roughly 80% of their energy as pure heat.
80%? That's absurd.
Only about 20% of the energy stored in that gasoline actually goes toward turning the wheels. An electric vehicle, by contrast, uses 90% of its energy to just move the car.
Right, so when people talk about the visceral roar of a V8 engine, the author argues you are just listening to the sound of wasted thermal energy.
Exactly.
It's basically a highly complex mobile space heater that occasionally moves forward. But I want to pause here and challenge the recurrent data.
Okay, go ahead.
Telematics are great. A billion miles is a huge sample size. But the real world is inherently noisy. People live in different climates, they drive with different weights in the car, they charge at different speeds. How do we know what is actually causing that 5% drop over 5 years?
Right. Is it the miles or the age?
Exactly. Is it the miles or is it just the simple passage of time?
That is the exact question researchers at Environment Climate Change Canada, the ECCC, wanted to answer.
Okay.
To find out, they had to completely isolate the variables in a way you can only do in a highly controlled laboratory. They designed a study to definitively separate calendar aging from mileage accumulation.
Okay, so this is like looking at identical twins to see the effects of lifestyle. Imagine two 8-year-old athletes. One twin sat on the couch playing video games for 8 straight years. The other twin ran a marathon every single day.
I like that analogy.
You want to examine their joints at age 8 to see what caused the wear and tear the age, or the miles.
That's a great way to look at it. The ECCC took two identical EVs, manufactured just months apart in 2015 and 2016. The couch potato twin, the low-mileage vehicle, had only been driven about 14,000 kilometers over almost 8 years.
That's practically nothing for an 8-year-old car.
Right. And the marathon runner twin, the high-mileage vehicle, had been driven over 176,000 kilometers.
So one was basically kept in a time capsule and the other was driven to the moon. What do they do to them?
They strapped both vehicles to a dynamometer. Think of it as a highly calibrated, massive treadmill for cars that measures exact power output. Then, they subjected both cars to extreme temperature testing inside a climate chamber,
Like how extreme?
running them from -7 degrees Celsius all the way up to a sweltering 35 degrees Celsius. They wanted to see exactly how much the batteries and the drivetrains had degraded under extreme stress.
Let's look at the couch potato first. The car that basically sat still for 8 years. What happened to it?
The low-mileage vehicle still lost 8% of its total battery capacity.
Just from existing.
It's from existing. This isolates the mechanism of calendar aging. Inside a lithium-ion battery, there are slow, parasitic chemical reactions that happen constantly, regardless of whether you ever turn the key.
So the battery's aging even if you park it in a garage and never look at it.
Exactly. Over time, a layer inside the battery called the solid electrolyte interface, or SEI, slowly thickens. As it thickens, it traps active lithium ions, meaning they can no longer hold a charge. The mere passage of time claims that 8% toll.
Okay, so time steals 8% through parasitic reactions. What about the marathon runner? The car with 176,000 hard kilometers on it.
That vehicle lost about 20% of its capacity.
Wait, let me do the math on that. If calendar aging takes 8% no matter what you do, and the heavily driven car lost 20% in total,
Yeah,
that means the physical act of driving an additional 160,000 kilometers only degraded the battery an extra 12%.
exactly. The sheer friction of daily use, the mileage accumulation, is far less damaging to the long-term chemical health of the battery than most consumers assume.
That's wild.
But here is the most fascinating part of the ECCC study, and it goes back to your point about the internal combustion engine being a mobile space heater.
Okay.
The researchers also tested the physical drivetrain and the onboard charger of both vehicles.
The actual mechanical parts moving the car?
Right. They found that the high-mileage vehicle's power electronics and drivetrain didn't degrade at all compared to the low-mileage one.
Hmm.
The charger maintained a 93% efficiency rate, completely shrugging off the 176,000 kilometers it had endured.
That is mind-blowing when you compare it to a traditional car. I mean, an internal combustion engine practically destroys itself from the inside out.
It really does.
It requires thousands of tiny, contained explosions every minute. You have pistons grinding against cylinders, massive friction, incredibly corrosive oil breakdown. But an EV motor basically has one moving part. It's essentially just solid-state electronics and a magnetic rotor.
When you remove the mechanical trauma of internal combustion, the longevity of the vehicle skyrockets.
But wait, this brings up a huge contradiction. If the physical chemistry of the battery is degrading, say, 1 or 2% a year, according to the recurrent data, or that 8% calendar aging from the Canadian study, why don't drivers notice it?
That's a very good question.
I mean, if I've lost 8% of my physical battery capacity, why does my dashboard still say I have a number of percent range when I unplug it in the morning? Are the manufacturers actually lying to the dashboard?
Well, it is an illusion, but it's an incredibly clever, consumer-friendly illusion. It comes down to something called the Battery Management System, or BMS.
Okay, how does that work?
Automakers know that chemical degradation is inevitable, so they don't actually let you use the entire physical capacity of the battery when the car is brand new. They log away a hidden buffer of energy.
Oh, interesting. It's like a concert venue that can hold 10,000 people, but for the first few years, they only sell 8,000 tickets.
Oh, I like that.
As the main seats wear out and break down, they slowly open up the obstructed view seats in the back. The venue still holds 8,000 paying customers, but they're just using different parts of the building.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Let's say your battery physically holds 80 kilowatt hours of energy. The manufacturer's software might lock it down so you can only access 75 kilowatt hours.
Gotcha.
As the chemical battery degrades and the SEI layer thickens over the years, the car uses over-the-air software updates to quietly, slowly unlock that hidden buffer. They feed you a little more of that reserve capacity to offset the physical degradation.
So they are artificially smoothing out the user experience. You don't feel the 8% drop because the software is compensating for it behind the scenes, keeping your daily range stable.
Precisely. And the data shows the strategy works beautifully. Brands like Cadillac, Ford, Hyundai, Mercedes, and Rivian are specifically highlighted in the research for maintaining excellent 5-year range retention using these exact methods.
And it's not just the software that is evolving, right? The actual chemistry of the batteries is shifting. That Italian automotive essay we looked at brought up a whole new generation of vehicles.
Yes, they call them the spiritual heirs to the classic Fiat Panda.
The Panda concept, right? What is that about?
They're talking about a new wave of European EVs like the Fiat Grande Panda, the Renault Twingo E-Tech, and the Dacia Spring. What makes them the heir to the classic Panda is a return to absolute simplicity and durability. They are shifting away from traditional nickel-manganese cobalt batteries and utilizing LFP batteries, lithium iron phosphate.
What makes an LFP battery so different under the hood? Why is it the indestructible option?
It all comes down to the molecular bonds. In a traditional lithium-ion battery, you use cobalt, which is fantastic for energy density.
Meaning you can pack a lot of power into a small space.
Right, to make a heavy SUV go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But those chemical structures are more volatile, they degrade faster, and are more prone to thermal runaways if damaged. LFP batteries, on the other hand, use iron phosphate.
And that's more stable.
Much more. The covalent bonds between the phosphorus and oxygen atoms are incredibly strong.
So they are chemically stubborn, they don't want to break down.
Exactly. Because those bonds are so stable, LFP batteries can handle thousands upon thousands of charging cycles with minimal degradation. They are practically immune to overheating.
But there's a trade-off, I assume.
There is. They might not give you 400 miles of range for a luxury sports car, but for a daily commuter vehicle, they are virtually indestructible. The Italian source notes that these LFP platforms are so robust they could easily last 15 to 20 years on the road.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It's a philosophical shift.
Yeah.
Automakers are stripping out the hyper-complex, glitch-prone software and focusing on pure, analog-feeling reliability.
Okay, we have covered a lot of dense chemistry and physics. But if you are listening to this right now, we want to make sure you walk away with something incredibly practical.
Absolutely, we want to respect your time.
Even if the battery is built to outlast the seats, you still want to protect your investment. How do you take all this lab data and turn it into actionable steps to maximize your range and battery health starting today?
The single most impactful habit you can adopt is the 20-80 rule. For your daily driving, you want to keep your battery state of charge between 20% and 80%.
Why those specific numbers? What happens at 100%?
Think of the battery's anode like a hard-shell suitcase. When you charge the battery, you are physically stuffing lithium ions into the carbon lattice of that anode.
Okay, so it's like packing.
Yeah, up to 80%, it's like packing your clothes normally. Everything fits fine.
Yeah.
But getting from 80% to 100% is like sitting on the suitcase and forcing the zipper shut to cram in one last pair of jeans.
Oh, I've definitely done that. It feels like the zipper is going to burst.
Right. And in a battery, it puts massive mechanical and chemical stress on the internal structure. It can actually cause microcracking in the lattice. By staying in the middle, you dramatically reduce that physical wear and tear.
Makes sense.
And alongside that, you want to avoid relying on constant DC fast charging. Slower level 2 charging at home allows the ions to intercalate smoothly without generating excess heat.
Keep the suitcase comfortably packed and charge it slow. What about when you're actually out on the highway? Because range anxiety usually hits when you're far from home.
To master highway range, you have to understand the aerodynamic tax. Pushing a vehicle through the air requires energy, and fluid dynamics are unforgiving. Air resistance doesn't increase linearly, it increases with the square of your velocity.
Meaning going from 55 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour isn't just a 25% increase in effort for the car.
Right.
The air practically turns into a solid wall.
That's the perfect way to visualize it. Driving over 105 kilometers per hour, roughly 65 miles per hour, causes an exponential spike in aerodynamic drag, draining the battery rapidly.
And I suppose a roof rack doesn't help.
Oh, anything that disrupts the smooth wind tunnel shape of the car amplifies that tax. Roof racks, bike carriers, or heavy cargo boxes can easily kill 5 to 15% of your range. Even your tires play a major role.
Just the pressure, right?
Yes, underinflated tires increase rolling resistance on the asphalt, which can subtly drain another 5 to 10% of your range without you even noticing.
So take the roof box off when you aren't going skiing and check your tire pressure. That's easy enough. But let's tackle the biggest fear of all winter. The conventional wisdom is that EVs basically lose half their range the moment it snows.
Cold weather does increase the internal resistance of the battery, slowing down the chemical reactions. But the real culprit of winter range loss isn't the battery getting cold.
It's not.
No, it's the human getting cold. Heating the cabin of a car is incredibly energy intensive. You are essentially using battery power to heat a massive volume of freezing air inside a glass box moving at highway speeds.
Okay, when you put it like that, it sounds ridiculous.
That cabin heater can drain 10 to 30% of your total range.
But I'm not going to drive to work in a parka with the windows freezing over. What is the actual hack here?
The secret is preconditioning. Most modern EVs allow you to turn on the climate control from your phone. You do this while the car is still plugged into the wall charger in your garage.
Ah, so you're using grid power, not battery power.
Exactly. Let your house's electricity warm up the cabin and the battery pack. Then, once you unplug and hit the road, the car only has to maintain that temperature rather than working to raise it from freezing. Furthermore, once you are driving, rely on your heated seats and heated steering wheel.
That makes total sense from an efficiency standpoint. It takes vastly less energy to apply heat directly to your physical body through a seat than it does to pump hot air into a giant and drafty room.
Exactly. And the final piece of the puzzle is regenerative braking. When you take your foot off the accelerator in an EV, the electric motor actually runs in reverse. It turns into a generator.
I love that feature.
It's fantastic. It captures the kinetic momentum of the heavy-moving car and converts it back into electricity, feeding it straight into the battery to slow you down. Instead of grinding brake pads together and turning your momentum into useless friction and heat, you are literally harvesting free electricity every time you approach a stop sign.
So let's pull all of these threads together. We've looked at the billion miles of telematics data showing 95% retention over 5 years. We've seen the Canadian lab test proving that massive mileage barely moves the needle compared to simple calendar aging.
Yeah.
We've seen how LFP chemistry and clever software buffers are extending lifespans even further. The consensus is overwhelming. Your EV battery is not going to turn into a useless paperweight in 5 years. The battery is probably going to outlast the seats.
It really is. If we are looking at LFP batteries capable of lasting 20 years for daily city driving, retaining 70% of their range after 2 decades, it forces us to completely reframe our understanding of automotive longevity. The physical chemistry of these cars is spectacular.
Wait, if the physical battery survives 20 years, and the electric motor has no grinding pistons and virtually no wear and tear, what actually kills the car?
And that is the true underlying threat we need to be talking about. If the physical hardware lasts 2 decades, the thing that will turn your car into a paperweight isn't battery degradation.
What is it then?
It is software obsolescence.
Oh, wow. Just like a perfectly functioning laptop from 10 years ago that physically works fine, but the manufacturer stops supporting the operating system so you can't load a web browser anymore.
Precisely. The future of car maintenance won't be about changing dirty oil or replacing blown head gaskets. It is going to rely entirely on the right to repair movement.
That's fascinating.
As these cars become massive rolling computers, their lifespan will be dictated by whether independent mechanics can access open-source software diagnostics. We're going to need modular digital parts and a whole new generation of microelectronics technicians to keep the digital brains of these cars alive long after the physical batteries have proven they can go the distance.
The battery is going to outlive the touchscreen dashboard it's connected to. That is a wild paradigm shift.
Really is.
If you are sitting there wondering about the longevity of an electric vehicle, the math is in. It is not a disposable smartphone. It is a highly resilient piece of chemical engineering that is far more likely to die from a software update than a failed battery cell.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you for spending your incredibly valuable time with us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something you can actually use on your commute today. Keep learning, keep questioning those assumptions, and we'll catch you on the next one.